Welcome, everybody, to Flat Earth Nation. Mud flood was Armageddon. Mud flood was Armageddon. Don't let them tell you anything else unless they're willing to debate you in a fair and honest way. Well, I have about an hour until my live show, and I thought since I'm going to be researching this anyway, I may as well share it while I'm researching it. So let's check this out.
Cards are focusing nicely. Okay, so here's the box for it. Hey, what's up, everyone? MC Mike, how are you doing? I think I'm gonna run to the store to get something called Do It Brother. I got my cold drink here, right? Oh man, looking forward to this. Me too, me too. I took a peek at some of these, man. They're super cool, super cool. Cold beers, nice. Now check this out. This is straight dope on America's dirtiest deals. Drug war trading cards from Eclipse Comics from 1991. Okay. The writer for this, check this out. Writers Paul Brancato and Bob Callahan. Now, Paul Brancato I looked this guy up, and we'll see the intro for it. There's a little card in here that gives us the intro. Okay. But when he wrote this, he was a part of, let me find this. Symphony. Which symphony? San Francisco Symphony. And his name is still there. Second violinist. I'm going to link you guys up in chat. So, and I'm pretty sure this is the guy, right? Because inside it says he was with the symphony. So this is the guy that wrote a lot of this stuff. Okay. And I didn't look up Bob Callahan. Bob Callahan, I believe he's known from the comic book world. His name is very familiar to me. Ding Bob, how are you doing? How's it hanging? Pretty good. And the artist is Saline Yukop. Okay, and I don't know Saline Yukop. I didn't know him. And I looked him up, and he's written multiple books regarding America's foreign policy in the Middle East and Arab uprisings and stuff like this. And he is a professor at UCSB, Department of History. Okay. And let me give you the link for this. Now, this came out in 1991. I'm pretty sure this is the guy. Okay. Pretty sure this is the guy. So this is like 30 years later. I'm assuming that picture is that picture is an older picture. Okay, that's what I'm assuming. Eclipse Enterprises, P.O. Box, right? Oops, where are we? P.O. Box 1099, Forestville, California 95436. $9.95 US, $10.95 Canadian. And we talked about this when we were doing Eclipse Comics readings. And Eclipse Comics, during the distributor wars in the early to mid 1990s, sort of went defunct. They went bankrupt. And Tom McFarlane bought the rights.
I want to just add, if you look at the zip code, you see a 9, a 5-4, which is a 9, and a 3-6, which is also a 9.
To all of Eclipse's comics library for $25,000, I believe, in 1995, right? So he has the rights to this thing, I guess. I don't know what this fine print says. I couldn't read it with my glasses. It was too small for me. Let's see if this is going to work out. What does that say? It's way too small for me to read. And we're going to get glare off this, so it's not going to work. I could bring in our magnifying lens. Let's bring in our magnifying lens. Hopefully we're not going to be too noisy about it. Let's check this out. Let's bring in a magnifying lens. Let's see what the fine print says here. See if we can read it. Come on, focus. What are you good for if you're not good for reading fine print? Oh. Too much glare. Is this going to work? It's not working. Oh, there it is. Text. Copyright 1991. Paul Brent, Cato, and Bob Callahan. Art. Copyright 1991. Saline Yukop. Okay. Very cool. And this stuck. So I got to contact the person this week to see if they know more information on where the cards are. Someone actually on Discord contacted me saying if I didn't have the cards, so 40 of these boxes we bought for $100, $117 US or something. Basically, it came out to around $3 a pop for us. We're going to auction some of these through points. I didn't know this thing existed, but I didn't know this thing existed. And we found out that this thing, Eclipse Comics, put out trading cards, and they were actually the first comic book publishing company to put out trading cards like this. We found out about this through reading Real War Stories #2. This is a series. This was just a 2-issue set that I bought in a previous comic book haul. This is Real War Stories #1. This one is Real War Stories #2. And we did a reading of this comic. We read, I believe, 2 or 3 of the stories in this. One of the ones that we read but I don't think they're around anymore unless they changed their name. And they were supporting was Butler's War is a Racket, sort of an adaptation of War is a Racket, the book that we read during a previous stream. Sort of we did an ASMR reading of it with overlaid with a little bit of mathematics, right? So we read we saw the advertisement for trading cards that Eclipse Comics had put out. Okay. And we're going to try to get our hands on all of them and read all of them. This is the first one we're doing a reading for. Okay. The Drug War trading cards. And the writing for this is done by as well. And Eclipse Comic put out some other cards as well. One of them is Rotten Scoundrels, which is sort of has a rookie card of Donald Trump, and that thing sells for a lot. As soon as I get some funds, I'm going to get my hands on that as well, and we're going to do a reading of that. It sells for a couple of $100, that set, okay, if not more. Okay. The artwork for this, Saline Yukop is a freelance artist who collaborated with Paul Brancato on the Iran-Contra scandal and Bush League trading card sets. A graduate of San Francisco Academy of Arts in 1986, his illustrations have appeared in San Francisco Weekly, Yoga Journal, the Bay Guardian, and the Express. Okay. Messing with these things, right? And gang, before we start reading these, which is very much related to everything that we're doing here, all the discussion in this stream and many other streams, free Assange, free Assange, free Assange. Julian Assange is a publisher and journalist that is being crucified for trying to bring transparency and accountability of capitalist power to humanity. For more information, see wikileaks.org, defend.wikileaks.org, or our Julian Assange and WikiLeaks playlist on CensorTube. Gang, let's have a read through these trading cards. Declaration of War. That's George W. Bush holding up a bag of cocaine or crack cocaine as evidence. Beautiful artwork. Let's read the description. Drug wars. Number 1. This is card number 1. In his first nationally televised address from the Oval Office in September 1989, President Bush declared a $7.9 billion war on drugs. Brandishing a bag of crack cocaine, he called narcotics the gravest threat facing our nation. Quote, the greatest threat facing our nation, end quote. Every U.S. president since Richard Nixon has waged war on drugs, yet today they are more widely available than ever before. Bush's own involvement with drug wars began in 1971 when Nixon appointed him to the White House Cabinet Committee on International Narcotics Control. As vice president, Bush was Ronald Reagan's drug czar, heading the National Security Council's drug interdiction task force. Interdiction task force. Yet during Reagan's presidency, while federal anti-drug spending tripled, cocaine supplies soared tenfold. 1990 saw new highs in worldwide narcotics production. Bush's plan echoes failed policies of previous administrations. Over 72% of funds are allocated for law enforcement, new prisons, and interdiction, and less than 23% for prevention and treatment. The casualties of the war on drugs are mostly poor people of color, while the real criminals, bankers and businessmen who share the fabulous wealth created by the $300 billion a year worldwide drug trade, are rarely punished. Historically, drug wars have been used by imperial powers as smokescreen for foreign intervention. For the US, this has taken the form of sending military aid to corrupt allies who use the weapons not against drug traffickers with whom they are often in league, but to crush their internal political enemies. Meanwhile, U.S. agriculture and trade policies encourage production and export of deadly legal drugs. Drug War Trading Cards. Text copyright 1991. Paul Brancato Art 1991. Saline Yukop. Eclipse Entertainment P.O. Box, and we know that. Now, one of the stories here, okay, now keep this name in mind. Gary Webb, okay? In the sentence here that you see, yet during Ronald Reagan's presidency, while federal anti-drug spending tripled, cocaine supplies soared tenfold. Okay. That is not a coincidence or bad management. That is the CIA running drugs. And we know this because of Gary Webb's reporting and look into the in-depth investigative journalistic work that he put out called The Dark Alliance. Okay. And Gary Webb was suicided, Epstein. He was basically assassinated for what he put out, and he was blacklisted by the establishment, by the so-called news agencies, by the government, and targeted. Okay. That's card number 1. This alone would be at least a couple of classes in any history class, in any grade in high school. Okay. Let's look at card number 2, Opium and Empire. Opium and Empire. Anglo-Chinese Opium War. Beautiful artwork. Look at that. The Chinese ships were a lot smaller, eh? Wow, that's why they got knocked around. Right? The British Navy. Opium and Empire. Card number 2. When Britain conquered India's Bengal province in the mid 1700s, the region's Patna opium came under the control of British corporate proxy, the British East India Company. China refused to accept English manufactured goods in exchange for tea and silk, insisting on hard currency. So each year, the East India Company brought the entire opium crops and brought the entire opium crops and smuggled it into China for Chinese silver, with which it legally purchased Chinese tea. The Emperor of China viewed opium as a poison introduced by foreign devils to destroy his nation, and in 1799 banned opium smoking and importation. The British ignored the ban because opium financed Britain's growing tea habit. 10% of Britain's revenue was derived from taxing tea, and the booming drug economy in Bengal provided a market for English textiles. Between 1773 and 1839, British exports of opium to China multiplied 30-fold. By the 1830s, after the British East India Company lost its monopoly, the smuggling trade was handled by firms like Jardine, Matheson and Company, and Dent and Company, who operated under British protection and bribed Canton officials to allow the drug traffic. In 1839, the Chinese again took a stand, blockading shipping routes and confiscating 3 million pounds of opium, 1 year's production. But British naval forces, backed up by armed merchant ships, destroyed all Chinese resistance by 1842. Following their defeat in the First Opium War, there was a later conflict in 1860s. The Chinese were forced to cede certain port cities to the British and could no longer contain the flood of opium. By the early 1900s, there were 15 million Chinese addicts, and China, which had begun its own opium cultivation in 1880, was the world's leading producer. That's card number 2. Wow. When this was card number 1, we didn't take a look at it again after we did a reading. Might as well, right? George W. Bush. Dirty, dirty, dirty. Let's see the next one. Drug Lord Jesse Helms. Jesse Helms. Look at this guy. Let's see this. Card number 3. Number 1 killer drug. Tobacco is the one drug of abuse in the U.S. 53 million. Tobacco is... So this is as of 1991, the history that we're reading here. Okay. Card number 4. St. Valentine's Day Massacre. St. Valentine's Day Massacre. America's drug of choice. On January 19, 1920, the 18th Amendment became law, making alcohol illegal. Not only was prohibition unenforceable, the enormous profits generated by bootlegging created a new criminal class whose legacy flourished long after the law was repealed on December 5th, 1933. Though Chicago gangster Al Capone, whose internecine St. Valentine's Day Massacre of 1929 symbolized the mob violence of Prohibition era, was in jail by then, bootleggers like Lucky Luciano, Meyer Lansky, Mo Dalitz, and Frank Costello used their ill-gotten millions to create legal liquor empires and corner the gambling business and the heroin trade. Joseph Kennedy used his bootlegging fortunes to create a political dynasty. The violence during Prohibition taught mob leaders the value of bribes over bullets and of cooperation between families of cartels. Eventually, both labor unions, especially the Teamsters, and Hollywood became victims of this powerful new national crime syndicate. Not only is alcohol use legal, it is often glamorized. Beer makers spend billions sponsoring major sporting events and linking beer drinking to athletics in their TV ads. Producers of high-octane, low-cost beers and wines like King Cobra and Tight Train Express target ghetto communities with special promotions, but the figures on alcohol abuse aren't pretty. Out of 102 million users in the US, 18 million abuse or are addicted to alcohol, costing the US $120 billion a year in lost work, accidents, treatment costs, and deaths. Each year, 75,000 babies are born with permanent brain damage, which can occur with even moderate alcohol use during pregnancy. Alcohol is a causative factor in one-third of all accidental deaths. And I believe the person here, Joseph Kennedy, we're talking the Kennedys dynasty, right? John F. Kennedy, I believe that would have been his grandfather, I'm assuming. Maybe, if I'm not mistaken. And this is, I believe, Al Capone. Yeah. And alcohol was illegal for 13 years in the United States, I believe. 1920 to 13 years. 1933. Incredible. Right. Incredible.
That's really 13 years and 11 months. That might as well be 14 years.
Card number 5. Big Ear 2. Big Ear 2. ear too. He does have big ears. He's got a pretty big head too. Big ear too. Let's check out what the story on Big Ear 2 is. The Green Gang. While rival warlords vied for power in the chaos following the 1911 fall of China's Manchu dynasty, the Nationalist Party of Kuomintang, KMT, joined forces with the communist-led labor movement. After KMT leader Sun Yat-sen's death in 1925, Chiang Kai-shek took over the party, and by 1927, the KMT army, bankrolled by Chiang's close relatives, financiers H. Kung and T.V. Sung, controlled most of northern China and was preparing to march into Shanghai. Communist labor leaders called a general strike to welcome KMK liberation from Shanghai's warlords. Not wanting to share power with the communists, Chiang turned to his old friend Tu Yong-shing, the head of a Shanghai secret society of triad called the Green Gang, controllers of the local heroin trade. Big Ear 2 recruited and armed thousands of gangsters who brutally suppressed the strike and murdered most of its leaders. The subsequent infiltration of Two's thugs into the labor movement, combined with financial and public relations aid from Sung's American connections, the Roosevelt and Henry Luce, publisher of Time and Life magazines, helped Chiang stay in power until World War II, when the Japanese invaded and took over the drug traffic. After the war, the KMT and the Green Gang regained control, but in 1949, Mao Zedong's communists drove them out of China. The Green Gang tried to move into Hong Kong but failed. The KMT relocated to Taiwan, but sent a large KMT army contingent to Burma, where with CIA assistance, they expanded the local poppy growing industry. Chiang profited from Burma's heroin trade and enjoyed U.S. government support until his death in 1975. Long-time warlord, working for the CIA, with the CIA, staying in power with the aid of the CIA. Lucky Luciano. Lucky Luciano. Lucky Luciano. That's a great picture or great piece of artwork. Look at that. Lucky Luciano. And this is card number 5, I believe, isn't it? Card number 6. Card number 6. Lucky Luciano. Right? Lucky Luciano. It's got a little mole. Operation Underworld. Card number 6. During Prohibition, Jewish gangsters like Meyer Lansky and Arnold the Brain Rothstein controlled the heroin trade, while Italian and Irish mobsters concentrated on bootlegging. But in 1931, with the end of Prohibition in sight, the Italian mafia, led by Salvatore C. Luciano, aka also known as Lucky Luciano, forged an alliance with Lansky and moved into the heroin business. In 1936, Luciano was convicted of forced prostitution. His incarceration in the U.S., combined with Benito Mussolini's crackdown on the Sicilian mafia, was a major blow to the syndicate's heroin operations. But World War II gave the mafia a new lease on life. Concerned with German sabotage on New York's waterfront, the U.S. Navy, through Lansky, convinced Luciano to enlist his gang in protecting East Coast docks. Luciano also arranged for Sicily's mafia to help the Allied invasion of Sicily in 1943. As a result of these successful operations, and perhaps aided by $250,000 in contributions Lansky had given to New York Governor Thomas Dooley's election campaign, Luciano was released by Dooley and deported to Italy in 1946. In 1947, intent on rebuilding their heroin empire, Luciano and Lansky met in Havana with the U.S. leaders of organized crime. Lansky was entrusted with managing the syndicate's finances and negotiating with suppliers. Florida mafioso Santos Traficant Sr. was designated to run local heroin operations. Cuba became the major transit point for Luciano's heroin shipments, at first obtained by diverting Italy's legally produced pharmaceutical heroin. Italian authorities soon disrupted this source, but by then there were new suppliers. Corsican gangs led by the Giurini brothers, who ran heroin labs in Marseille. Lucky Luciano, getting in bed with the U.S. military and the Jewish mafia and helping the landing of Normandy, the invasion of Normandy. Crazy, crazy, crazy. Crazy, crazy, crazy. Marseille's dock strikes. Marseille, is it Marseille? Is that how you pronounce it? Dock strikes. Nice. Card number 7, the French Connection. So Marseille dock strikes. Right. The French Connection. And there's a movie called The French Connection, which is really good. Marseille. Thank you, Father God. Card number 7, the French Connection. Having found the Sicilian mafia useful during World War II, the U.S. government again turned to organized crime in its post-war battle against European communists. In November 1947, wildcat strikes erupted all over France and in Marseille. The vital port city, which was the stronghold of French communists, 80,000 striking workers, paralyzed the city. The newly formed CIA sent agents of a psychological warfare team there to meet with Corsican underworld leaders such as Anton applied money and arms to the Giurini brothers to assault on picket lines and union leaders, finally breaking the strike a month later. In 1950, another strike was similarly defeated, leaving control of Marseille's dock to Corsican gangsters. Within a year, Marseille's heroin lab, Gerini's, and others were in full operation. By 1965, America's heroin addict population, largely supplied by these labs, had grown from 10,000 to 150,000. At first, most of the opium supply for Marseille labs came from Turkey, but as time passed, Southeast Asia's Golden Triangle became the main source. France had a colonial outpost there from 1890s until 1954, when it was replaced by the US. As the colonial power in the region during the First Indochina War, 1946 to 1954, French intelligence, working closely with Corsican narcotics syndicates, took over the opium traffic to finance their operations. After the French left, the Corsicans remained, and until 1965, these syndicates, led by Bonaventure Roch Francisci, who had ties with the Gerini's, and his airline Air Laos Commercial, Air Opium, quote, Air Opium, provided drug transport to markets in Bangkok and Saigon. And just a note regarding the US government shipping weapons and providing training to the mafia in France to prevent that region from unionizing further and getting adequate work and pay and compensation for their workers, and to fight against so-called communism that was prevalent at the time, rising at the time. This same operations are sort of going on in Mexico as well. They occurred under the Obama administration in a big way. Look into Fast and Furious, where the United States was shipping automatic and semi-automatic weapons, supplying automatic and semi-automatic weapons to Mexican drug cartels, during the Obama administration. So this practice still continues to this day. Card number 8. My lovable fascist. Yakuza in the background, I believe. Japan, the map. Let's see where this takes us. Card number 8. Wilbury and the Yakuza. Less well known than the CIA collusion with Corsican gangsters in France and the US is the US military's use of Yakuza gangs in Japan. The Japanese equivalent of the Italian mafia, Yakuza syndicates have controlled the rackets in Japan since the early 1900s. Long allied with the ultra-nationalist right, Yakuza thugs provide the muscle which suppressed the left and kept fascists in power during World War II. After the war, Japan was occupied by the Allies under Supreme Command for the Allied Powers, General Douglas MacArthur. In 1946, MacArthur's G2 intelligence Chief Major General Charles Wilbury began paying Yakuza criminals to break communist leg strikes, and infiltrate labor unions. Born Adolf Weidenbach in Germany and called My Beloved Fascist by MacArthur, Wilbury recruited Japan's former Chief of Military Intelligence, Lieutenant General Seizu Arizu, to help run his covert operations and succeeded in freeing many Class A war criminals. One of these men, Yoshio Kodama, served as a liaison between G2 and Yakuza gangs and later worked for the CIA for 25 years. What the Corsicans became to the heroin trade, the Yakuza became to the Asian amphetamine market, a monopoly they still hold. Amphetamines, speed, have been popular in Japan since World War II, when the most well-known military users of amphetamines were kamikaze pilots. Today, Yakuza have allied with Chinese triads in Hong Kong and Taiwan in global sales of heroin and speed. Together, they now market a smokable amphetamine called ice, common in Hawaii but still rare in the US mainland. Ice is cheaper and more potent than crack cocaine and could become the next drug epidemic. Card number 8. My lovable fascist. Serious dose of history. Wow, 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 wow. Serious dose of history. Chairman of the board. Chairman. The sun is shining on us. Chairman of the board. Chairman of the board. Who's that guy in the wheelchair? Look at him laughing it up. Drinking it up. Where are they? Where are they? Let's take a look. Meyer Lansky. That's the person that we read about earlier in the previous card, right? The Jewish mobster in the United States. Meyer Lansky, the father of white-collar crime. Meyer Lansky was the mob's financial wizard. Born Meyer Shuchwoljanski in 1902 in Poland, Lansky came to the U.S. at age 9 and by 1921 was refitting stolen cars and bootlegging liquor. He soon entered the heroin business. In 1931, Lansky became partners with Lucky Luciano, and during Luciano's incarceration from 1936 to 1946, he oversaw syndicate operations. After gaining Luciano's release, Lansky reorganized World War II interrupted heroin business and set up a chain of banks in southern Florida, the Caribbean, and Switzerland to launder drug profits. Lansky's investments associated in these banks included CIA agents, other drug lords, billionaire eccentrics, and Republican Party bigwigs. The syndicate's base of operations was Cuba. Lansky had used the Caribbean as a smuggling base since 1920s, when he cut deals with Bahamian and Cuban officials to ship bootleg rum to the U.S. After 1933, he and Cuban strongman Fulgencio Batista were partners in several Havana hotels and casinos. When Fidel Castro overthrew Batista and kicked out the syndicate, Lansky oversaw the mob's resettlement in the gambling and resort paradises of Las Vegas and Bahamas. Luciano died in 1962, and Lansky assigned his Havana lieutenant, Santos Traficante Jr., to run the heroin business. In 1965, Lansky sent his Swiss banker courier, John Pullman, to Hong Kong, setting the stage for trafficants' 1968 meeting in Hong Kong and Saigon with Chinese heroin suppliers. New heroin resources created by the U.S. war in Laos had made it necessary to deal with Corsican middlemen. The future disruption of the French connection was already in the works. Wow, wow, wow. And that's why.
All right, we'll listen to one more card, and then I have to break it off until I have another show starting at 7 o'clock. So we have enough time for one more card, and I'll probably do some more of these. I'm finding it very conclusive about the mob has been in control, and there's a reason that OxyContin was being given away, and so many people are scratchy and constipated. They're taking heroin pills, baby.
And they consider the Cuban Revolution to be one of the biggest threats to the United States because it cut into their main port of drug money with the mafias of the world. Right. That's why Castro is so hated. Okay. Very cool. That's card number 9. Card number 10. Look at this. Look at this. Who's that scumbag in the middle? Who's that scumbag in the middle? The Great Heroin Coup. The Great Heroin Coup. Who are those two other guys? Oh, Traficante. That was the name of the guy. Card number 10. Traficante, Nixon, Girini. Traficante, Nixon. That's Traficante, Nixon, and Girini. When Richard Nixon became president in 1969, the heroin trade was dominated by the Corsican mob, which had been led by the Girini brothers until factionalism put the Francisci Venturi gang in power. The New World division of this empire was headed by Auguste Ricord, a former Gestapo collaborator who operated from Paraguay. But before Nixon left office, the Corsicans had been supplanted by the Sicilian mafia. This coup was achieved through Nixon's selective war on drugs, by working to extradite Ricord from Paraguay, by securing Turkey's commitment to halt opium cultivation, and by encouraging France's crackdown on the Francisci Venturi gang. Nixon helped destroy the Corsicans while leaving the Sicilian network intact. Southeast Asia replaced Turkey as the main source of heroin, and Santo Traficante Jr. unseated Ricord as the Western Hemisphere's top drug lord. From his Teamster Hall headquarters in Tampa, Florida, Traficante's influence spread widely. In the Lansky-generated banks of southern Florida, his fortunes were laundered alongside KMT drug money from Southeast Asia and CIA funds for secret wars against Castro. The Torrijos government in Panama and the Nicaraguan Sandinistas. Traficante even had connections in the White House. When Watergate burst, it was learned that 4 of Nixon's plumbers had worked for mob-controlled casinos in Batista's Cuba. Nixon's drug war also employed CIA-trained Bay of Pig veterans linked to Traficante's drug operations, with heroin supplied by Hong Kong's KMT-linked syndicates, and with friends in high places. Traficante had by 1973 built the most powerful narcotics organization in the world.
This could only have been pulled off in a reset world run by the mob where everyone just wanted to get rich because there are no re-elections. Everything, at least from the time of Prohibition, and probably even before that, has all been a setup. Thank you all for joining with me. Share this video. It's a common, no permissions needed. It's a flat earth nation. I'm never going to tell you anything else. Why would I? I'm trying to prove I have your best interest at heart. Amen. Hallelujah. Aho.